And Steve Cohen says he's a what? Oh no, sorry, he's addicted. I thought he said he was
So
something.
the word ad is there too.
Let's get started and
Let's let's rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Every Other Wednesday. We are welcome. We're really excited that people are here. If you look at the screens, you'll notice that Richard is rather still, and the reason is we've actually had a little side bet for quite a while as to who would be the first person to miss a call because they were on a plane. And Richard is actually on his way to the airport as we speak. He tried to schedule around this. Originally, his flight was to be this morning, but because of COVID, flight was canceled. They put him on this afternoon. So he is only joining us as a participant, audio only, and at some point he may fly off into the sky.
wait,
So with that said,
but
uh, oh yes, yes, but
it's Richard's birthday tomorrow, as we all know. And so here's the thing, everybody. As a surprise to Richard, I'm just putting in the chat box. There's his email address. Would you write it down? And tomorrow, not today, but tomorrow, we want to see if we can get as many birthday emails to Richard as we can. So Richard at contentedcows.com. Send him a birthday wish.
with that said, let's actually get into some content and some programming. We called this session "Giving Employees a Microphone Doesn't Necessarily Give Them a Voice. Things to Do to Help Employees Speak Up." As usual, we have the usual culprits here. We have Michael Kerr from beautiful Canmore, Alberta, joining us. We have Jeff Tobe from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Richard Hadden by voice only and in spirit totally from, well, in theory, Jacksonville, Florida, but flying somewhere we don't know. And I'm Sunjay Nath calling in from Toronto. We're actually going to do a very simple program. We are going to actually just cover 5 points, 5 ideas that we're going to kind of beat to death. And unlike what we normally do, what we're really going to do is encourage people to give us some feedback from the audience as we kind of go through these. I'm actually going to post them right now in the chat box. These are the 5 things we're going to talk about. We're going to throw one up there and just kind of discuss the merits of it. Organizations we know that are kind of doing this, some ideas around that, and we'd also love to hear from other people in the chat box. So the 5 things are: try to be inclusive, meaning, let's hear from the quiet ones as well as the squeaky wheels. Recognize, not only reward. Don't leave people hanging. Let people take ownership. And number 5 is listen. And I actually kind of put those in a reverse order. I think number 5 being the most important. So let's actually start with that idea, this notion of try and be inclusive and listen to the quiet people and all that. So really what we're doing at a high level here is we're talking about this notion of not just paying lip service, going, we have a suggestion box. And we've heard Mike Kerr say this on several occasions. A lot of people feel there's a beautiful suggestion box, and just on the other side of it is a paper shredder or an incinerator of some sort. And so it's not only about just paying lip service, but actually getting people feeling comfortable to wanting to speak up. Just before we got on the call, Mike actually mentioned this interesting statistic. He said 85% of people have been admitted to not speaking up on a safety or a performance issue. So for whatever reason, often people don't feel compelled or safe to speak up. And so what we want to do is talk about strategies to make people feel more, I believe the technical term is mucher when it comes to speaking up.
Mucher.
So mucher, yes. So let's start with that.
Mushier? I'm not sure. But before, as we're doing this, I just read a statistic this morning. I don't know if you guys agree. I'm not sure, but I read that 59 to 63% of Americans right now are working remotely. I would think it's higher, wouldn't you? It also said 40% of Canadians. So this is even bigger. I think whatever the number is, I think being inclusive right now is the toughest thing that leaders are facing, and especially when it comes to company culture. So how do we include everybody? And that touches on a few things you've got there, Sanjay. But what I'm finding,
let's start with that. Let's dig into that idea. This trying to be inclusive. How important is it to get everyone, even the wallflowers and the quiet ones, not only the people who are speaking up?
That's what
how important is it, and how do we do it?
I was just going to say, I was talking to a client in Florida, longtime client, and they're having a challenge. They have 600 plus employees, and a lot of employees don't seem to want to be included. And even though they're doing their work, they're producing their work, but when they have some kind of a meeting or voluntary kind of call, they just don't show up. So I think we have to figure out how to include everybody. And so my answer to your question is, I think it's got to be all inclusive across the entire organization.
Yeah. When I talk about this topic, when I write about this topic, when I do a blog or my easing touches on this topic, I can tell you with absolute certainty, no other topic generates more feedback from my readers than this topic. It is a huge bugbear for employees. It affects morale big time. It affects how engaged people feel, how involved people feel when they're not included. It affects how innovative you can be in your company because you're not getting ideas from everybody. You're not tapping into that incredible resource. It has so many impacts. So this really is, I want to stress this, this is a huge and critically important topic that you need to get right. Have I told the Vasa worship story on an every other Wednesday?
You've told it to us many times, but go ahead. I don't think they know.
I don't know. Maybe people in the chat. Do you remember? Did I tell this story? Because I love this story for just to open up. It's such a great story. I was doing research on rocking workplaces in Stockholm, Sweden, and they have a museum, this old wooden warship built in the 1620s. There was a ceremonial launch. Everybody goes down to watch this ship, goes out in the harbor, the ship sinks. 30 people tragically died. And the weird punchline of this story is the captain of the ship and some of the crew members knew it was going to sink. In fact, they stopped the safety testing a few days earlier because it wasn't safe. So why did they go ahead? Because the King of Sweden at the time had signed off on the design of the ship and was pushing them to get it out before it was ready, and nobody had the guts to speak that proverbial truth to power. And that goes on in all our, as Sanjay made that quote at the beginning, right? 2 Harvard professors coined the phrase organizational silence to talk about that phenomenon of people not suggesting ideas, not asking difficult questions, not speaking up when they see something.
It's not only, you don't need to be a Harvard professor, it's called the emperor's new clothes, right? And that's the other thing though too, is to touch on Jeff's point, where do you draw the line? Because I agree, we want to hear from people that want to be heard from. But there's a difference between people who are too shy to speak up and people who legitimately don't want to speak up. And we have to be able to draw the line between those. So I can give you an example. Years ago in speaking, you guys are speakers. I'm sure this has never happened to you, but sometimes when I speak, the room fills from back to front. I'm sure I'm the only person that ever happens to.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so what I did was in my early, this got to be 20 years ago, I thought, I got a portable mic. This room is convenient. I will go to the back of the room and make everyone turn around. And so that way I have everyone in the front. And from a speaker perspective, we want people in the front because the energy is different. When you have the first 3 rows blank, we know it's an energy sucker. It's a vortex of energy. So this was a great solution. So I went and I said, hey, everyone, surprise, turn around. This is the front of the room. And they get their moans and your groans and Anyways, after the presentation, I got so much trouble. People coming up to me cross-armed going, we sat at the back of the room for a reason, and you kind of violated us of that, and it made me realize that people want to engage at the level in which they want to engage. And it's not our place to say it should be this level or it shouldn't be that level. What we want to do is offer the smorgasbord of here's an analogy, right? It's an all-you-can-eat buffet. We hand out plates, and it's for them to serve themselves. But if we force people to speak up, or we mandate people to give in when they're not ready, we actually create more animosity, and we're doing the counter effect of actually what we want to do.
By the way, Sanjay, as the elder member here now, because Richard's not here, I sit up front because not to be engaged, it's because I can't hear or see any longer. So there's a difference, exactly. Sorry, Mike.
I was going to say, maybe I'm not quite clear what your point is, Sanjay, but I'm not sure I entirely agree. I think a leader's job still is to be intentional about building a culture of trust and openness and honesty.
I'm not trying to
including starting with their own behavior so that they're approachable. That's one of the most important things we can do as leaders, is make sure we are doing more than halfway. We can't just say, oh, I have an open door policy, come and see me sometime. We have to lean in. We have to set up processes. We have to encourage people to be able to speak up, and especially those people that are uncomfortable, to make sure their voices are included.
Yes. We want to create an environment where people feel comfortable, but what we don't want to do is force people out of their out of the zone in which they're not ready to step out of. That's what I'm getting.
For sure. So let's talk ideas. I mean, here just one example that came to mind that I always love is Pixar has this what they call an anti-hippo policy in terms of their meetings, and hippo is kind of a loose acronym for the highest paid person in the room. So it's making sure that that people don't defer to the top dog in the room, that their ideas don't carry more weight than other people's ideas. So it's kind of a reminder of the need to be more democratic and open. And I think that applies not just to the highest paid person in the room, it can sometimes apply to the loudest person in the room, the person who's most vocal. Doesn't mean they have the best idea. Just because you speak the most often, or you're the loudest, or you're very articulate. So we have to make sure we do, again, intentionally make sure we are involving everyone.
I want to make a point about that people should be watching the chat box. We may not refer to everything, but people have some great comments. And I'm just wondering, Max, you brought up a great point. I'm not sure we're talking about diversity and inclusion as much as we are literally inclusion, correct? There's a fine line there. D&I right now is so important in culture and in the world today. We're actually going to do a show on that, maybe unbeknownst to my colleagues here, but that's my plan for the next show. So we're talking about literally how do we include people who are working in a remote setting, correct?
Yeah.
Or even if they're not working in a remote setting.
In any context.
They're shy. Lisa, what Lisa's saying here is, when you haven't heard from someone in a while, it's a little bit of a check-in. And not, again, I don't want to create an environment where people feel mandated and they say things for the sake of saying things rather than saying things that they truly want to say them. And at the same time, too, if they feel uneasy or unsafe or feel they're going to be ridiculed or prejudiced against for saying something, and then they don't want to speak up. So that what we are trying to say is, how do we foster that environment so that someone can point out and go, look, at the emperor has no clothes. And I think one of the biggest issues is about is setting the example. Is when the CEO, the head honcho, the executive director, what do you want to call her, can say, hey, here's what I think, and lead by example. I think that is the simplest, most effective way to do so.
Yeah, and in terms of really specific practical tips, here's a few things that I find work great. Like dirt simple. In meetings even, it's been shown that if you have just even 5, 6, 7 people in a meeting, some people, the introverts, the shy people, the people who lack confidence maybe in your team won't speak up. So a dirt simple thing to do when you're engaging in discussions, in brainstorms, whatever, break those groups up into small little 2-3 pods and then have them report back to the biggest group. Dirt simple. Have people bring their suggestions before the meeting so their ideas, their questions aren't attached to personalities. And those people who are a little fearful maybe of speaking up are perhaps more willing to do that. So it's about thinking about different ways, different tools to engage people. I know the HR company Workday, they have something called Feedback Fridays, where every Friday they survey all of their employees, I think 9,000 employees or something, with just one question, just to keep in touch, keep a regular check on the pulse of the entire company.
Okay, this is so ironic, guys, but Nicole Blau, you win the EO Wednesday comment of the day. We're talking ironically about being inclusive, and I never realized that all these comments are sent to panelists only. Guys, if you're making comments, make sure it's sent to everybody. Everybody can't see your comments. I never even thought about that. What a great thing, if you think about it. When we're meeting remotely with our employees, we should probably tell them to have all comments go public versus just.
I just copied all the comments. I copied all the comments and added them in, and did a cut and paste. So hopefully people can read that.
Now it's just a mess. So,
yes, thank you. Now it's just a mess. But I want to jump on. Brid has a great comment here. Does a lack of the water cooler moment in the virtual world make the hippo even more scary to speak out? As they are less human, I guess we're disconnected more, right? So should the leader be purposely making themselves human? That's always a good concept, I think, in the virtual world, and bring a personal self into the virtual world. And that's from Birmingham.
I think it's great. And I just read an article where the CEO of, I think it was Hershey Chocolate Company. Anyway, I believe it's a large company, has now office hours online. And so what he's done is he says to all of his employees, look, I'm available every Friday from noon to 1. I'm making the times up, but I'm available from every Friday from noon to 1. I'm here just to talk. If you have questions, you want to just visit. And I think that's remarkable. That's going to be inclusive, and that's saying, exactly what Britt's saying, really, is making themselves more human and more available.
So on this idea of being inclusive, let's be inclusive of some of the other ideas. Let's move on to the next one, which is recognize, not only reward. So what's the difference? I mean, this is something we've chatted about in previous EOWs. So someone want to remind the difference?
Rewarding versus rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, people think that.
I want to step in here because it's a huge thing about what I talk about too. I want to step back because it's not just recognizing. I say under the umbrella of appreciation, there's recognition and there's praise, right? Two different kinds of people. Rewarding is more like one-to-one. Sunjay, here you get a day off, or you get the parking spot of the month. Congratulations. I think recognizing is public is where I was going. Praise is thank you very much for doing a great job. Here's a reward. But recognition is truly about making it public, letting people know. And I think you've got to also know your employee well enough too, which one they would prefer. Sometimes it's okay just to say, Sunjay, thanks so much. You did a great job on that project last week, whatever, versus making it public and putting it in the company newsletter. But I think some form of appreciation, I'd like to change the word. I think some form of appreciation, absolutely. And they say within a week, by the way, that it's no longer effective if it's more than 7 days out. And one more thing that I recently read was 83% of employees surveyed, and I don't remember how many, so I'm just making it up, I guess, but it was definitely 83% of employees surveyed said that they had not been recognized in the last 2 weeks, 14 days. So that's huge.
So thank you for that, Jeff. Let's tie this back into this topic specifically. So let's make sure we're praising, recognizing, and rewarding our employees for speaking up. You get more of the behaviors you reward and recognize, right? So there's a company in Canada, I love this. They give out, and only employees can nominate fellow employees for this reward, and it's called the Exalted Order of the Extended Neck Award. And it goes to whichever employee asks the most difficult, challenging question of senior leadership. So who puts their neck out and asks a really gulp question in front of everyone, they get rewarded for that. So it makes it safe and it encourages more people. But even at an individual level, Jeff was talking about the importance of just one-on-one praise. It is so important that if you're going to build trust in your workplace, that when your employees come and have those difficult conversations with you, when they give you feedback, ask you a question that you think is just crazy, that you watch your reaction. And I mean your body language, your facial expression, your tone of voice, and that even when it's really difficult feedback, one of the first things you remember to do is to thank them for being honest, to thank them and saying even, hey, that must have been really difficult for you. I appreciate that. Must have been hard for you to come to me and talk about this. So thank you for that.
I mean, it's a very much a carrot and stick kind of thing, right? We want people to speak up. We want people to create that environment. So yeah, if we're freaking out at them, we're yelling at them, we're belittling them, embarrassing them, any of that stuff, they're less likely to do it in the future. The other thing too that I think there's a big difference between recognize and reward is usually there's more of a monetary value associated with reward. You're usually giving them something that costly to the company and the organization, but recognition is usually more time-based. So saying is you don't necessarily need a budget to actually reward people in a way, or give them appreciation in a way that gives a positive feedback loop to the behavior in which you're trying to instill. So I think that's the underlying thing, is make people feel good about sticking out their neck. And it could be something, and you've probably all seen this, where you've been to some sort of, Christmas party and they give out the Emmy Awards, and it's the person who, whatever, stuck out their neck the most, or the person who, brought in the most coffees for their employees or whatever it is. But again, bringing it back to what Mike was saying, with regards to this person who came up with the craziest idea, the person who came up with the most efficient, most pragmatic idea, more and more, if we can highlight the behavior of which we want to see, we're going to get more of that behavior.
Yeah. It was, wasn't it Charles Schultz who was the CEO of Starbucks at some point? And he decided that he would write a personal note on everybody's birthday. I see a lot of this in our chats about writing personal notes. And as the company grew, he continued to do it. And he did it through 10,000 employees. He would write a personal note, not an email. He'd write a personal note for their birthdays. I mean, that's huge, right?
It's huge. And there's and you reminded me, I actually, and as Steve pointed out, yeah, it's Howard Schultz. I actually thought he handwrote all the names on our Starbucks cups. I thought he was just.
That's why he got them wrong, because there's so many. That's I can't tell you how many times I come out as Hef.
So sorry guys, I'm just gonna, there's a few comments here in the chat box I just want to get to as the chat box guy. Stephen, thank you for that. Send a written note as a good job, not an email, or not just an email. And yeah, that makes such a huge difference, as Jeff said. And Dave, one of the greatest appreciations I ever received was a simple handwritten note from our CEO. He mentioned that he knew I'd been working hard on a project and he appreciated. And what you said there, Dave, is so important too, because he tied it back to the overall company. Perfect. And that's so important, to tie it back always to your values, to your mission, always relay it back to your culture and your goals, what you're trying to achieve. So, and again, no public mention, just a simple note, but man, handwritten thank you cards, dirt simple, but make it easy on yourself. You know, have a stockpile of them ready to go so that it's not a hassle to do it.
But wait, Mike, I have a saying I want to share very quickly. It's don't worry when you're not recognized, but strive to be worthy of recognition. Oh, sorry, that's not mine. I guess that Lori wrote that. Seriously, I love that, Lori. As a matter of fact, I'm writing it down, and I'll give you credit if that's yours next time, but then it's mine.
So this idea you're talking about, you know, handwritten notes, which is great and it's very simple, but you can kind of take the idea on steroids too. So back in high school, I was student council president, and we had this idea where we invested about $100. And we bought these white ceramic mugs. And one of the things we recognized as student council, our biggest roadblock often could be teachers. So if we had a dance and the teacher gave lots of homework, that would affect our dance. But if we had a dance and the teacher said, hey, no problem. So we recognized that having the teachers on our side would be a really good idea. So what we did is we took every staff member's name and we put it in a hat. Every staff member, the custodial staff, the ladies that worked in the cafeteria, the administration, the teachers, educators, everyone in them. Then we divided it by the number of student council meetings we had. And it worked out to be like 4 or 5 names. So every student council meeting, we pull up 5 names of teachers or educators in the building. And we would then take these mugs and we'd put their name on it. So Mr. Lucas was the computer teacher. We get someone artistic to draw a computer, and it said Mr. Lucas on one side of the mug. And the other side of the mug, it said, congratulations, you've been mugged by student council. And every week we put 5 of them in their boxes, in their mailboxes. And it became this thing where we didn't tell them anything other than that's all we did. And so every week 5 more teachers would get them. And I remember my Miss Hinkson, my business teacher, she came up to me, she said, where's my mug? If I don't get it by the end of the semester, you don't pass, right? And it was just it took its life on its own. People had a lot of fun with it. But this is what the amazing upside of this was. I had teachers coming up to me saying, it's amazing what student council has done this year. I've never seen a student council work so hard. And the funny thing is they had no idea what student council was doing other than this mug thing. But this little piece of recognition of feeling appreciated created this halo effect of, oh, everything must be great. And that's how you create that environment where people are more willing and able to step up and speak out.
Yeah, and thanks, Sanjay. And Frederick in the chat box too says, you know, we're talking about this hybrid virtual world we're living in. Sometimes, especially virtually, just a simple I see you can make a difference in a virtual environment, right? And using people's names and just making sure we're intentional again about checking in with people that maybe don't always speak up.
And you know what? It really is about knowing your team members, knowing your people that are, you know, as best as you can. And I'll just share with you, I did a session with 65 people. I was sharing offline, 65 people from 16 countries this weekend. And some of the comments, and they were constantly commenting, don't laugh, Sanjay, I'm not going to tell the story you think I am.
Please tell the story.
How stupid I was, you mean? But anyway, but I could tell one guy was a real smart aleck. And so I happened to mention him a couple of times. Everybody was on video, and I happened to mention at one point that when he stood up, he was wearing shorts. And not like most of us probably, but just mention it. And he wrote me a note afterwards and said, just thank you for including me. So Frederick, I totally agree. Including people by name and recognizing them is huge right now in a remote world.
But now let's remember our central topic here, though, gentlemen.
Yeah.
How do we give people a voice?
Yeah.
Let's
keep
back
going.
to it.
But again, it's that simple. It's, hey, Mike, I really appreciated you speaking up last week, or that idea you gave in the meeting. I think it really helped Sally in accounting, or and the more specific you can be, but just pointing those out, because then Mike's more likely to give to mention it again the next time.
The other thing is a leader. Why can't a leader? I'm doing what ifing, but why can't a leader reach out to somebody who they don't usually reach out to and say, look, the next meeting we're having, we're discussing this. Would you help me with the presentation? Or somebody, and it may not even be anybody who is in a leadership position. But I think we're back to engagement. And if my friend Richard were here, he'd be talking about something to do with engaging people, right? And I think that it's just a conscious effort on the part of leadership to include people in every step right now.
And include the forgotten quote unquote heroes, right?
Yeah.
So
all right, moving on to the next one. Don't leave people hanging. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And if someone brings an idea and it doesn't fall through and you're unable to do it, getting back to them. How important is that?
Critically important, hugely important. It goes back to my thing about the paper shredder on the other side of the suggestion box. We need to remember this isn't a one-way communication street. It's got to be about creating a real dialogue, a real conversation in your workplace so that it's back and forth. And if for whatever reason you can't implement someone's idea, let them know why. Thank them for them. Praise them for coming up with such a great idea, and say, you know what, here's why we can't do this now, but keep those ideas coming. I love your enthusiasm. I love your energy. And that's how we're going to improve our business, grow our company, is with ideas like that. So we depend on them.
I guess I bring the U.S. perspective to this panel today, right? So I know that Gallup does an engagement survey every year. It's worldwide, but in the States it's called State of the American Workplace. And in 2019 they found that 38% of employees who felt dismissed by their leaders said they lacked motivation. And so and that's something I use all the time when I'm talking about how do you motivate people. But the bottom line is that if you're not reacting, or at least telling me why you're not using my suggestions, or I think it's rounding it out, or I'm not sure the right word, but closing the loop. How about right? Closing the loop? Then I'm not going to be motivated, and so it's a huge thing, and I think that's where we make the mistake. That we're not coming back and saying, Sanjay, we didn't use your idea because it just doesn't make sense at this time, or whatever it is. It's just sort of, it's the suggestion box, Mike, with the shredder behind it.
And that's so demoralizing, isn't it? I remember working in just a god-awful workplace culture where the mantra became literally, if you have a good idea, keep it to yourself. Because nobody's valuing them. And you reminded me of the flip side of that, Jeff. Michael Abershoff, the commander of the USS Benfold, who I've had the pleasure of interviewing for some of my books, he talks about how he stressed that message to all of his crew members and trying to turn that ship around, that I want your ideas. I want your 1% ideas. I don't care how inexperienced you are, new you are, bring me your ideas. And one of the coolest things he would do, if somebody came to him with an idea that was a no-brainer, that low-hanging fruit kind of idea, because in my books, there's nothing more motivating than that. You get a low-hanging fruit idea from an employee that you can easily implement, that is the most motivating thing in the world. So he would actually go on the PA and say, hey, I've got Jennifer in front of me here. She's got this really cool idea. We're going to start that tomorrow. Now, how powerful is that for Jennifer and all of the crew?
At my kids' gymnastics, when someone learns a new skill, it's called ringing the bell. And everyone stops and they ring the bell and they take a bow. Just along this idea of don't leave people hanging and recognize, rewarding, and giving them a voice. A very good friend of mine. Okay, so there were 60 people at my wedding. He was one of them. Ironically, his name is Sunjay too. He held the original patent.
Are you Sunjay 1?
It was not me. It was a different one. He held the original patent for something called wireless internet. So,
Wow.
True story. He was working for a small company called Nortel. He was in the IT department, and at the time, he held a PDA in one hand, if you remember what a PDA is, and he held a modem in the other. And he said to his boss, he said, look it, these are roughly the same size. They should go together. And you want to talk about empowering bosses? You know what his boss said to him? Shut up and do your job. So he went and he patented it himself, and he sold it to a company for $50,000 that year IPO'd for $700 million. It could have been something that could have saved Nortel, literally. But anyways, all right.
Sanjay, that's a great point, right? If you don't listen to your employees, somebody else might.
Absolutely. Let's move on. Number 4, let people take ownership. So they come up with this great idea. Now what?
Oh, okay. So I just have to say I've worked in the opposite of that culture, where if you had a great idea, all of a sudden it was my boss's idea. and that's, you've got to let, not only, I don't think it's just about taking ownership. I think it's also about accountability. So if I'm coming to you, Mike, and I say, look, great idea. I want you to own it. I want you to champion it. Don't give it to somebody else to champion, and I've seen that happen over and over again as well. And it's only because we think somebody else might be more qualified. Thanks for the idea, Mike. Give you full recognition, but I'm not giving you ownership of it, which is just a silly thing.
I think that to look at it from a bit of a negative side, I think it's really, really important to let people sometimes fail. I think that sometimes failing in a safe environment can be some of the best things. Like if you write a test and you get 16 out of 20 questions correct, what are the first 4 questions you go look at? You go, where did I mess up? So sometimes taking an idea and letting someone champion it and falling and failing in a safe environment can allow them to tweak it, bring in the right team members to actually propel it to the next level.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the advertising company is, but they have a heroic failure award that they give out when somebody tries just a crazy idea and it flops, and sometimes embarrassingly even in front of the client. Again, goes back to that recognition, that reward more behavior, because they don't want to punish the person. Yeah, the idea didn't work, but we have to try those ideas. Excuse me, we don't know until we tried them. But to this central point, I have a feeling maybe we're starting to suffer from deja vu in these meetings. I can't recall if we talked about the IKEA effect ties into this very principle, right? I don't know if you gents have heard of the IKEA effect, but it's this idea that when you buy something from IKEA and you have to put it together yourself, as we all know, you are way more invested in that product because you had to roll up your sleeves and figure out how to read those instructions and what to do with those 17 leftover parts.
And that's what, by the way, that's what stock options are. Stock options are that same idea. It's trying to give people ownership in the organization. But you don't have to go to that extreme. You can give people ownership in an idea and a concept. You're the champion. Yeah, you know what? You're doing the surprise party for Richard. And it could be something small, and it could be something much more significant as well. But when people bring an idea where they are able to champion it, letting them do so helps everyone. Cool.
I'm excited about the next one. I want to make sure we get to it.
Yeah, I was going there because it's probably the most important one. It's by far the simplest. It's this idea of listen. If you want people to speak, give them an audience. Listen intellectually, emotionally, socially, be there and actually have a genuine interest in what they have to say.
Yeah, I want to recommend a book if I can. It's old, but I love it. John Izzo wrote a book called Stepping Up. I think it was written in 2012, but it was great. And, he said that, I don't remember how many professionals were surveyed, but leaders making decisions without seeking input is one of the top 5 reasons that people leave an organization. So, so when they feel like everything's coming from above with decision making. But I also think that, listening should be a strategy. It shouldn't just be something that we talk about and pay homage to. I think it should be like an integrated approach, and that's something that does come from the top to the bottom. I think that leadership really, gets together top level management with HR, and it just requires everyone in the organization, I guess, to implement strategy. It's a top down thing, but it should definitely be a planned, organized. How do we improve our organization by incorporating people's ideas and by listening to our people?
And Jeff, you reminded me of Marshall Goldsmith's study of 64,000 people that found the number one thing people said they wanted more of at work was to just be asked their opinion. And yet it was the thing that managers were doing the worst in these studies. And when we talk about listening, when I survey folks in my workshops and ask them, what are some of the characteristics of the most memorable, the most effective leaders you've worked with in your career, no one ever says, oh, so-and-so was a great talker. You know what they always say, of course? They were a good listener. They really listened to me. And we have to practice. I think, Jeff, you used this term last EO Wednesday, something along the lines of extreme listening, or maybe it was Richard. Yeah, where we think about the simple stuff like putting your smartphone away in front of them so they can see that, stepping out from behind your desk, showing that you are 100% present for them is critical.
What other tips?
Mike, I do want to say that, Mike, on your tombstone, we are going to put, he was a great talker. So, sorry.
Yeah, we've already ordered it, so don't worry about it.
I suck as a listener.
What are some of the? I think that's a great one. This notion of turning off the phone or flipping it over. I think that's a great one. What are some of the other things we can do other than repeating what they say and bobbing our head as they're talking? What are some of the things we can do to show that we're truly, honestly listening?
Well, it goes back to the previous point too, Sunjay. I think closing the loop shows that you are really listening. When you get back to them 48 hours later or a week later and say, hey, I just wanted to follow up on that conversation we had last week. I know you raised a couple of concerns. I want to see how you're feeling now that you've had a few days to think about this.
I think it's also
actually. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's what I was going to say.
I was going to say, and then the opposite. If you can implement the idea, let them know. But on the flip side, if you can, showing action. Being taken towards implementing that idea, that suggestion also goes a huge way for showing people like, oh, maybe they do actually listen. I've always found but I think it's important that we ask the right questions. I found this crazy when I was, doing my undergrad, and I was doing like surveys at the end of some of the classes. And as you recall, I have a degree in mathematical engineering. I would take these ridiculous courses like, fluid mechanics for nuclear pumps. And then we'd have this like exit survey at the end of the class that asked me questions like, did you learn what you needed to know about fluid mechanics for nuclear pumps? And I'd be like, I had no idea. So, you have to be sure you're asking the right questions, because people can give feedback, but when feedback is ill-informed or it's not asking the right person, then they're going to feel frustrated because you can't act on that anyways. So if I said, you know what, no, I wish we had more donuts in the class, I'm going to feel not listened to, because I gave my suggestion, but it wasn't poised in a way that I can actually truly be helpful. So it's really important that the questions we're asking and the feedback we're trying to get are within the wheelhouse and the skill set of the people that they can actually move things forward. In fact, this whole idea of listening. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Sunjay. I know we're running up on time here. We've got a lot of comments now in the chat box, suggestion box, I was going to say. Thank you for that quote from Roald Dahl. You'll never get anywhere if you go about what ifing like that. I think that was going back to Jeff's comment earlier. Extreme listening, yes, from Simon Sinek interviewing. You can find that on YouTube. I've seen that. That's a great recommendation. Lori, thank you for that. Attending a conference where you had to pair up and walk around the block only listening to the other person. It was hard. It is hard to just listen without reacting. And what do we typically do? We're rehearsing what we're going to say.
Hold on, wait. If they both have to pair up and listen to the other person, does that mean no one's talking?
No, I think they do it one at a time, smartass.
Oh, okay.
And then a book recommendation, We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter by Celeste Headley. Thank you for that. Highly recommended. I put in the chat box too. It's also important to listen to what is not being said. Listen to the gaps, to the spaces. That's really important too. And then thank you, Linda. I have employees develop their own development performance improvement plans. Let them write down and commit to what they will do to improve rather than give them a checklist of what they have to do. You get their buy-in and can then hold them accountable, and that is so true. That goes back to the IKEA effect, right?
The whole listening thing I find interesting is what a lot of consultants do, and organizations pay big dollars for, is go to the C-suite and go, what are your issues? And then they go, we're going to do a survey and we're going to find out. And then what they do is they go to the frontline employees and the middle management and they just listen. Oh, yeah. And then they bring it to the C-suite, and the C-suite goes, this is brilliant, thank you. And you can actually cut out the middleman by just listening to your people. They have the best ideas. They know the business inside out, and they have a vested interest in making the culture and the organization better. So
I know we're running out of time.
Sorry.
I know we're running out of time, so I just want to say, Sunjay, the question. Sorry, I just cut you off. I wasn't listening.
You totally did, and you're frozen, by the way.
I am.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
You can hear me, okay? I don't know what just happened. Anyway, it's a terrible picture. I look at 102. But anyway, the question you were talking about, asking the right questions. The most effective question I find is a what effect question. What effect is that going to have on the team? What effect will that have on the client? What effect? That tells people you're listening. Mike, I think you want to wrap things up.
I do. Well, Sunjay, did you have any final thoughts before
No, the 102-year-old cut me off. If that's it, I'm going to go pout in the corner.
That's those old farts. They're always just have to, get the last. Oh, now he's gone. He's disappearing. Hey, one more goofy idea I want to share. I have a client that has a Vegas room that they've actually decorated like a Vegas casino, and they use that room for really intense, difficult conversations, to really listen to each other and their people, because of course, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And it may sound a little cheesy, but they rave about it, right? Sometimes that works. Hey, and we have another great read recommendation, The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. Yes, I love that book. Excellent book. Thank you for that. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Sunjay, for cat herding us this week. I am going to be your cat herder in 2 weeks' time. That is, gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, that is October 7th, is it not? And we are going to be talking about, on that every other Wednesday, the exciting topic that is so relevant right now for so many of you, how to build, sustain a rocking, inspiring, great workplace culture in this new hybrid workplace world we are working in, where some of your employees, and I know it varies for everyone. Some of you have 20% of your employees still working at home. Some of you have 90% still working at home. But I know the vast majority of you have a mix, and that's not going away anytime soon, and it will probably never go away in our new reality. So we want to dive into that topic. How can you bridge those gaps? How can you unite the homers with the officers? How can you break down those silos? How can you make sure the people working at home still feel included and are engaged and are having fun, just like the people at work do? How do you make sure people aren't resenting each other in those different camps? So that's going to be our topic. Please mark your calendars now. Look for the link. Spread the word. Please do share the word, spread the word. And I would be so remiss if I didn't remind you that we are going to have a 2-day virtual event coming up, the EO Wednesday crew, with all sorts of guest speakers, all sorts of fun, door prizes, live animals. I don't know if there'll be live animals, but it's going to be fun. So mark your calendars now. Thursday, January 21st and Friday, January 22nd is when we will have our first virtual event. The plan is, of course, at some point we'll have these in person where we can actually meet in person, but for now it will be virtual. And if you have suggestions for topics you want us to cover, for speakers you want us to consider bringing in, then please do let us know, but we would love to have you. And so
Don't forget, Mike, starting in November, we're going to pick a name from those people who have registered. So it pays to register first. We pick a name and you will get a complimentary buddy pass where you can invite your CEO, you can invite your friends, anybody that you like. So you get a free buddy pass.
Jeff.
You can invite us. And Jeff has put the website in the chat box. Let me say it out loud for those of you that aren't seeing the chat box. It is www.eowednesdayretreat.com. That's eowednesdayretreat.com.
I'm going to invite.
Ironically, the retreat is not on a Wednesday.
I'm inviting Richard. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We hope you found this valuable, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time.